Well, there's certainly some challenges that we've experienced over the last few years, and of course we've got high standards, and if we don't meet them, we're disappointed. But of course that was back in 2014. Here we are in 2017.
It's only 2.5 years ago.
No, I know, but you know, 2.5 years is a long time.
Right. So is it better now? I mean, do you think?
I think so. Yeah.
I mean, it's changed for the better.
It's not perfect. I mean, you know, nobody would argue that, but it still remains true that police forces around the world look to us. And look to us as a great example of policing.
But they did then, and then she was
but Evan, it's really
then.
important, I think. You've got to acknowledge, I think everybody has to acknowledge, is that we police the streets of this city without a gun. And the reason we do that is because we have the respect and support of the public. That's vitally important. I think we should all recognise that.
Well, I mean, one of the points she made was that only 4 in 10 black people trust the police, if you ask them. And she said that was an unsustainable position. Has that improved?
I think it certainly has improved during my tenure in London. So one of the things, I think I can point to 2 things which I think are powerful piece of evidence that we're getting better. So one is we are now more representative of the London that I see on the streets. Now, if you look at the recruiting we've had over the last 18 months, 1 in 3 of our recruits is from minorities. What about the BBC? When was the last time you saw that many people coming from minorities who work here? I only isolate that as one example of the establishment. Number 2 is, and it was acknowledged in some of your reports, is that we've reduced stop search by about 70%. When I took over, we were stop searching about 1.3 million people a year. In my view, that's too many. Right. What we did in the next 3.5 to 4 years, we not only reduced the number of stop searches, we increased the number of people arrested. And at the same time, crime came down. So I think we proved we could do it better and target the people who need to stop it.
It is interesting, isn't it, because knife crime has started going up again in the last 3 years, quite sharply.
Well, not quite the last 3 years, but over the last, probably about last year.
Some of your staff think that is because of the delayed reaction of reducing stop and search. Now, is that plausible as an account of why knife crime is rising?
We're not absolutely sure. I don't think anybody can prove exactly what's happened, but I think there are probably 2 main reasons. As I took over, I instigated a gang command. I thought there was a gang problem in London. I believe there was. There still is. Right. So we targeted the gangs, and we put quite a lot of them away. I think we arrested and put in prison about 1,500 people. And, of course, they came out. The second thing is, there's no doubt that it's possible that we got too low in stop search. 70% is a very big change. Interestingly, at the same time in New York, they went from about 1 million stop searches to about 23,000. They went through the floor. They lost the support of the public. I don't think we did. And the reason I changed stop search was one of the reasons I've already mentioned to you. We were doing, I think, too many. 1.3 million is an awful lot in a city of at that time, 8.4 million. And number 2, every 4 weeks for the last 5.5 years, I've had a public meeting in a different part of London. And a lot of black families particularly coming to those meetings and complaining about the level of stop search. I'm still doing those meetings, but I don't get those complaints in the same way. I think people will acknowledge we've improved there.
There's a lot of concern about the calibre and the competence of the police. You'll know that there have been all sorts of episodes and you would expect there to be some. But I'm interested in what you think went wrong. For example, in the Stephen Port case, this is a serial killer. 4 bodies. It took 4 bodies to be found outside or in the vicinity of his own flat. He had spoken to the police about these things. Other people had said there's a gay serial killer, out there. And the police were like, no, it's just these are unrelated deaths, all in the same cemetery. Now, I think there's a sort of people are perplexed at how that sort of thing can happen. What is your theory as to where it goes wrong? Is that institutionalised homophobia? Is that just people a bit dim? Is it because police stations are not joined up and people don't...
It's always quite easy to say the police are a bit dim. No, but I mean, interestingly...
I'm just asking you what your account is.
I'm not saying you are saying that, but it's quite often a thing. We actually don't mind. Call us as dim as you like. We just get on with our job. But in these particular cases, I can't say too much because obviously the IPCC are investigating. I hope you'll understand that. I'm not trying to avoid the question. But if you go to that fundamental point, why do mistakes happen at times or why don't we spot things? On the whole, we do get it right. I mean, of the murders that we have in London, which are relatively rare, I mean, during my time, during the last 5 years, murders of about 103 a year. In the preceding 5 years, 130 a year. Our detection rate is about 95%. My point being, on the whole, we get it right. Now, occasionally we won't spot patterns, occasionally we won't spot things. I don't think we should leap to a conclusion until we've really examined each case. It looks intuitively as though we should have spotted it earlier. I accept that, but surely we ought to at least look at it seriously.
Right. Some that the management have been involved in, deploying resources to things on a colossal scale. People say it's because you're just responding to the whims of the politicians. Operation Elvedon is one that's cited. Plebgate is a very interesting one, isn't it? Because you actually accessed Sun journalists' phone records in order to find out who the source of a leak was to a journalist at the Sun. As you look back, do you think accessing phone records for a story as inconsequential as Plebgate, I'm not saying it wasn't consequential for the players, but it was not a murder, lives were not at risk, this was not a terrorist thing, and you used the RIP, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, to get journalistic sources?
You're quite right. There was just the allegation that the police had conspired to remove a cabinet minister. That was fairly minor, wasn't it? That's the issue that was being dealt with at that time. Let's look
and you felt it was appropriate to go and access journalists' records to find the source of their story?
Look, I don't sign a peace authority. That was found to be legal. Of course, eventually in the civil courts, it was found that, in fact, the PC Rowlands. Well, no, yeah. First of all, in terms of PC Rowlands, it was found to have given an accurate account of what was said at that gate. Let's look at Operation Elvedon. It was mentioned by one of your people, wasn't it? The people who were talking there. They fuse together three different things, don't they? They confuse hacking with Elvedon. The Operation Wheating was hacking. That was when journalists did.
Elvedon was the payments to officials.
All the officers that we put into that case, they looked first of all at hacking. Journalists did hack people's phones and they paid private investigators. Elvedon, because people who are watching this won't remember, was where journalists paid public servants for private information. And they paid significant amounts. In one case, £50,000. Soldiers, police officers. The people who received that money were all convicted with one exception of bribery and went to prison. The journalists, with one exception, were not convicted. You can only reach one conclusion from that, can't you? Is that the people receiving a bribe committed an offence, but the people who gave it them did not. I can't explain that. But it's got to be a serious issue. Let me just make this one final point, because you repeat the argument, this was quite a minor thing. The only reason we got involved in that is because two committees of Parliament, a public inquiry led by Lord Justice Leveson, concluded this was a serious issue. I didn't set up the public inquiry, but surely I'd have been arrogant or negligent to have ignored those very serious issues. And we did put officers into it for the two cases, the two operations I mentioned, and of course the blagging. The blagging by journalists of private information as well. You remember that Gordon Brown was said to have had information about his child taken from a GP.
Understood.
That, for me, is a serious issue. Right. So, yes, we put resource into it. We didn't disrupt the rest of London. And at any one time, we have big investigations ongoing.
Let me just ask you as a final question. Your successor, two women are in the running. Do you think it would make a difference to the ethos, the culture, the way the Met operates, to have a woman as the most senior police person in the country?
Well, first of all, during my 5.5 years, I've had about half the management board, including police officers and director resources, who are women. So we've already had some very senior women at the highest level in the Met.
Will it make a difference, do you think?
I just make that simple point because people don't always know it. In terms of who they pick, you ask me what to do, always pick talent. OK? So pick the right person for the job. Never pick second best on the grounds of their gender, their race, or anything else come to that. Always go for talent. If you do that, you'll have a next good 5 to 7 years. If you compromise and you think you're going for second best, why would you? And you're in danger of letting yourself get into a future that will be a compromise. And I would always advise never to do that.
Right. We have to leave it there. So Bernard Hogan-Howe, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.